The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Go up to 325 times your money with their new Pick 8. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first deposit offer up to $50 in bonus cash on Nordic Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get the best data-driven props and picks from Rhythm. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamepodcast.com. Just Rhythm, sportsgamepodcast.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently early Friday morning, roughly 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time on June 14th. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to preview the quarterfinals in both Stuttgart and Den Bosch. So we're going to preview all 8 matches on the card for Friday. Do want to briefly discuss, though, why the episode's coming out so late. Main reason, it was my birthday yesterday, so I was busy with some birthday dinners, etc. So point is I didn't get back till pretty late. Then I ended up having to do the WNBA show, had to edit that show, post it, and do the baseball show, editing that too. So I had a pretty busy night. Point is, though, I was busy with my birthday stuff, so apologies there. But was not going to simply ditch the episode for the quarters. So as a result, the episode is coming out pretty late. We will be going back to the normal recording time, though, of I'd say late. Let's go Friday night. I should say later today for the semis. So apologies for the very late recording time. We are going to go back to normal after this, but we had a pretty unusual set of circumstances, which caused the episode to come out late. So apologies, and hopefully you end up getting these picks before the matches start, or at least before you wake up. So either way, point is, apologies if you were expecting this episode for a couple hours. Nothing I could do about it, but it is what it is. Anyway, before I forget, do want to remind you once again to like, subscribe on YouTube to the show. Also a reminder to rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. So no matter how you consume the podcast, you can support the show. Leave us some feedback by either liking and subscribing or by rating and reviewing the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Also a reminder that we have some Tennis Gambling Podcast merch on the merch store, and I'm actually wearing a shirt right now. This is the Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. So if you end up wanting to get a shirt, you can get it on the SGPN website. So once again, a lot of great shirts, a lot of great overall quality when it comes to shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, all for the Tennis Gambling Podcast. And a reminder that we also have other shows, including the College Baseball Experience, because Noah Beanick is going to be live streaming each night on YouTube for the College Baseball Experience, and it's available for download on all podcast platforms for daily coverage and picks for the greatest show on dirt, the College World Series, until the end of June. And also, Circa announced they're giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes for Circa Survivor and Circa Millions. Sign up in Vegas and play from anywhere with footballcontestproxy.com. Promo code SGP to get 50% $50 off. That's footballcontestproxy.com. Promo code SGP for $50 off. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of what happened last episode and the recap of what happened in the round of 16 over the last couple of days in both Stuttgart and in Den Bosch. Starting off with the lock and dog. The lock streak does continue. We went undefeated with the lock streak again, but ended up not winning. Unfortunately, ended up pushing as we had the under 22 in the Kaboli and Struff match as it landed 22. And you ended up seeing Struff win 7-6, 6-3. That ended up pushing. For the dog, ended up losing as Griekspoor ended up beating Kekmanovic, but that ended up turning to a marathon. I believe all 3 sets went to breakers, and Griekspoor did eventually win in 3, so that one did not work out. Do have to quickly apologize, though, because I did find out on Bet Rivers they have updated player props. So I have lines, at least more line or more options for player props moving forward, and unfortunately, after I ended up recording this episode, I did find Kaboli team total under 9.5 on Bet Rivers at minus 125, which was a play that I liked more than the overall under, and that ended up cashing while this play pushed. So apologies there, but I will keep in mind that Bet Rivers does have team totals or player props, however you want to call it. So I will remember that moving forward. So apologies if you ended up pushing or even got the loss at 21.5. Either way, though, not the greatest episode. Could have been worse. And to go through quickly, the round of 16 over the last couple of days in both events. Going to start off with the Wednesday matches in Den Bosch. You had Brouwer, who ended up beating Mannarino in straight sets. So one of our outrights ended up falling apart. Mannarino did win a match, but then immediately got buried by Brouwer. I mentioned before that Dutch players have done well here in the past. Brouwer, though, I don't think is that good. But Brouwer has been good enough to make it into the quarters of this event. Humbert ended up beating Fees in straight sets. So good win for Humbert there, who's kind of had a bit of a shaky past couple of months. He was great when the year started. Then he kind of struggled in the clay season, and now he's trying to get back on track in grass. So far, so good. Griekspoor beat McDonald as he responded quite nicely after having the three-set marathon against Kecmanovic. He ended up almost blowing the second set entirely. I believe he was down 5-2 in the breaker, and then won the last 5 points as he won in straight sets. And he had the upset of the tournament so far, at least one of them, which was Vukic beating Khachanov as he won in 3. Very weird match because there were a ton of overall rain delays and even just darkness delays because you had the match really take a bunch of turns. Vukic was actually serving for the match in the second set. He choked it. Then he got broken again, and Khachanov ended up winning the second set 7-5. So he had all the momentum, and then they ended up delaying the match until the day after. And then you ended up seeing Vukic win in a tiebreak. Same exact thing as the previous set, though. Vukic was serving for the match again, choked it, but this time he ended up winning in a breaker. So, bit of a weird match, a lot of different days involved, and because of that, the momentum was kind of up and down and all over the place. And I do think that Vukic benefited from the extra night off leading up to the third set, because after choking away that many games in a row to end the second set when you're serving it out for the match, you assume Khachanov had the advantage, but then the overall delay definitely helped him regroup and ended up helping him win the match in general. Good win for Vukic, though. Good server, and he got the job done against Khachanov. So that was another outright that went down the drain for us. Moving on, though, to Stuttgart. Musetti ended up beating Kepfer in 3. You saw Tiafoe beat Homfin in straight sets, 7-5, 7-6. Bublik, one of our outrights, ended up winning as he beat Medjedovic in straight sets. And Draper did beat Giron in 3 sets. I should mention at least that Giron was able to destroy Murray in the first round. If Murray's going to lose to Giron that handily on grass, it's over. So get excited for Wimbledon and maybe the Olympics because his career is going to come to an end pretty soon. And I feel like that was definitely a sign that Murray is, I'll put it this way, it's going to sound harsh, but I'm going to be honest about it. His career's on death's door. Let's put it that way. So if you do enjoy watching Murray play, you better savor these moments because you're not going to have much left. But either way, you're not going to have many moments left. But the point is, Giron did eventually lose to Draper in that match. Moving on to the matches from Thursday. Korda got the job done against Nardi. A fun match there, 7-5, 7-5. Paul came back from a set down as he ended up winning in 3 against Pyron. That was one of our outrights as well. So Paul stays alive. de Minaur did beat Bergs in straight sets. And Raonic ended up getting the job done against Batista Agut as he dropped the first set and then did win the next 2. Good for Milos, who has not played much tennis recently, but he was able to win a couple of rounds here, and now he's going to try to make it into the semis. So we'll see what happens. Tough task, though, facing off against de Minaur, who was the number 1 seed in the event, but still, props to Raonic. We were not sure how he'd look in the event, and so far, so good. So moving on to Stuttgart, you have Nakashima, who was able to beat Gasquet. I was 100% right, though, about Zverev withdrawing from the event after losing the French Open final, and Gasquet did get the lucky loser draw from Zverev before Nakashima beat him. So was not shocked. Zverev ended up dropping out, and that resulted in Struff getting much lower odds than what we took him at, which is a good sign. And Struff ended up winning as he beat Rinderknech in straight sets that day. Berrettini ended up winning against Shapo. So like Raonic, Berrettini has been battling some injuries, and he looks good. Simply put, had a marathon against Safulin in the first round, which was not easy, and then he ended up beating Shapo 6-4, 6-4. And I said I wasn't into Schulten in this event, and I thought he would struggle, and he did. He lost Duckworth in 3, so had a good read there. Overall, though, point is not many shockers per se. I think Raonic making it to the quarters is a surprise. Berrettini we picked to win the event, so not shocked there. In Stuttgart has won the event multiple times, but I do think the main upset, at least so far in my opinion, was Vukic beating Khachanov. Now, to once again talk about the 8 matches that we're going to talk about on Friday, or for Friday's matches, briefly going through them, or for Friday's card, I mean. You have Korda taking on Paul, you have Griekspoor taking on Vukic, you have de Minaur taking on Raonic, and you have Humbert taking on Brouwer. Those are the 4 matches in Den Bosch. Then for Stuttgart, you have Tiafoe taking on Draper, you have Nakashima taking on Struff, you have Berrettini taking on Duckworth, and you have Musetti taking on Bublik, which means if you are keeping track of the outrights that we had for these events, that does mean we have a couple of outrights left for each event. Now, we have no quarter odds, so we are not going to be able to determine any outrights in the immediate future unless they lose. But for Stuttgart, we had Struff at 8-1, we had Bublik at 8-1, and Berrettini at 14-1. So all three of our outrights in Stuttgart are still alive for the quarter. So hopefully they all win and we end up getting 3 into the semis. As for Den Bosch, though, Kashanov ended up getting eliminated and Manarino got eliminated. And we'd still have Greek Spore at 7-1 and Paul at 7-1. So not as good as Stuttgart, but still decent. So hopefully our outrights end up coming through. Point is, though, we have guys who are still in the field, and that's all I could ask for. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Anyway, point is, before we get into any of the actual preview of the matches on Friday, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Nordic Fantasy because the pick gate is now live for the NBA Finals. Not many games left, potentially, as we might only have one game left in the NBA season. So make the most of it. You can create entries up to 8 picks, and Underdog will automatically double flex your entries. So you can miss up to 2 picks and still win your entry. With more picks to make and more ways to win, the excitement is higher than ever. The best part, you go up to 325 times your original amount. You can now use specials and boosts on all flexed entries. I will probably end up using Luka rebounds again for the pick 8, or maybe even Tatum rebounds for Game 4. So keep that in mind. Don't miss your chance to try it out before it's gone. And a reminder, some of the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $250 of bonus cash on Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the round of 16 and recapping our lock and dog picks. Now it's time to get into the actual preview for the matches on Friday. Starting off in Den Bosch, really does not matter where we start out, though, because both tournaments start exactly at 5 a.m., so not exactly one getting a head start over the other, but decided to do Den Bosch because that's just the order that it's in. So starting off with the first match on the card, you have a fun one between two Americans. You have Paul taking on Korda, which should be pretty even. In fact, it's one of the most even matchups on the board based on the betting odds. You have Paul at -120. You have Korda at even money. For the game spread, you have -1 for Paul. You have +1 for Korda. For the actual set spread, you have Paul -1.5 at +200. You have Korda -1.5 at +240. The over-under in sets is around +125 for 2.5. On the over, is around -150. And the point is you are expecting to see a very, very close matchup. Now, in the head-to-head, Korda's actually done well against Paul, as Korda is 3-1 lifetime, but Paul did beat Korda in the U.S. Open in 2022 in the most recent meeting, as he did win in 5. So, point is, Paul is the most recent winner between these two. Never faced off on grass, but Korda has been winning most of the matchups, and they've been competitive, as 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings did go to a deciding set. So, expect a bit of an up-and-down match for both guys. Paul did end up struggling in his first match off the bye against Papiron, but he did win in 3 after losing the first set 7-5. As for Korda, he has won in straight sets against pretty weak competition, but it has been competitive. He beat School Kate, who I really don't know, Australian guy, ended up beating him 6-4, 7-6, and beat Nardi 7-5, 7-5. So even though both matchups ended in straight sets in favor of Korda, the matches were close. So that being the case, I do think the over is worth a look in this matchup. I see a very, very close battle. So I think you might end up seeing 3 sets, maybe even a 7-6, 6-4, but I do see a 22.5, which you can get at like -130. I see chaos on this matchup, so give me the over, and I do think you will see a very, very tough matchup to predict over the course of it. So moving on to the next matchup, you have Greek Sport taking on Vukic. For this one, Greek Sport is all like -340. Vukic is around +270. For the game spread, Greek Sport is -3 and Vukic is +3. Over-under is around 23 flat. For the set wagering, Greek Sport -1.5 sets is even money. Vukic +1.5 is -130. Over 2.5 sets is +140. Now, Vukic, I mentioned before, did win a very interesting matchup against Kashanov, where Greek Sport had a very tough match in the first round against Kecmanovic, and then ended up winning against McDonald in straight sets in the second match. Vukic, though, I think, played well. Ended up going to 3 sets against Kashanov, 1 in straight sets against Purcell. He's been fine. He also had a challenger grass event to prepare, as he beat Chapo in Sir Bitten, and he also ended up losing to Harris in straight sets. So Vukic has been playing some grass matches recently, which has definitely benefited him after losing in the first round of the French Open to Zhang. But I do think Greek Sport is going to win. The question is, do I trust him to win by margin? Because he is minus a pretty large price. 340 is pretty big. I don't think he looked that great against McDonald, and I don't think he looked that good against Kecmanovic. So I do wonder if he's a bit too big of a favorite in this matchup. In theory, I can see Vukic winning a set It would not shock me if there was a breaker in there. I think Griekspoor is going to win. I think he's going to make the semis again. But I do question if the price is right, and I don't think it is. I think Griekspoor has been a bit more vulnerable than the odds makers suggest. I think he should be closer to, in my opinion, 280. I think 340 is too high, so I guess the value is on Vukic. But I am picking Vukic to at least make the match interesting. But eventually, Griekspoor is going to win. If you want to take Vukic to win a set at minus 130, I don't hate it. Maybe a breaker in the match. Over 2.5 sets, though, at plus 140 might be interesting. But these odds feel off to me. I like Griekspoor. I think he's a good player. I did pick him to win the event for a reason. But he has not looked that sharp. And I do think that Vukic can make it interesting. So that's kind of how I'm looking at that matchup. Moving on to the next one, you have Raonic taking on de Minaur. de Minaur is minus 273. Raonic is plus 228. Game spread is de Minaur minus 2.5, and you have Raonic plus 2.5. For the over-under in games, you have 23.5. For the set wagering, de Minaur minus 1.5 sets is plus 110. Raonic plus 1.5 sets is minus 140. The over 2.5 sets is plus 135. Now, Raonic is over in his career against de Minaur, as he's 0-2. There was a retirement in there as they faced off in the Australian Open this past year, actually, and Raonic won the first set before eventually retiring in the middle of the third set when he was down a break in the third, one set apiece. Faced off in Brisbane in 2018, and de Minaur did win that one in straight sets. Now, Raonic has been good, as he was able to beat Thompson in straight sets, and he was able to beat Bautista Agut in 3. Bautista Agut, though, we know his most successful service randomly in his career is grass, which I'm sure some of you didn't know, but he's past his prime. I've been calling Bautista Agut washed for the last year or so. He's not as washed as Team, who got a wild card, by the way, or I should say an automatic entry into Wimbledon. So congrats to him and to Wimbledon for showing him some, I'd say, respect before he officially retires at the end of the year. He's not as washed as Schwartzman, for example. The point is, though, Bautista Agut's nowhere near as good as he used to be, and I do think that going to 3 sets against him can cause issues when he's facing off against de Minaur in the following round. So not the best scheduling spot for Raonic, and de Minaur did look okay in his first grass match of the year as he beat Bergs in straight sets, 7-5, 6-4. I like Bergs. I think Bergs is a pretty good player, but I do think that at the end of the day, de Minaur is going to be a bit too consistent. Raonic might be able to bomb serves, but I do question if Raonic will be able to handle the long rallies with de Minaur without spraying unforced errors. I have my doubts. I think de Minaur is going to be able to outlast Raonic. I think fatigue will play a serious issue in the last couple of sets in this matchup, maybe even in straight sets. Point is, though, I think Raonic might struggle stamina-wise, and I do think de Minaur will eventually wear him down. So I am going to go with de Minaur to get the job done, and I do think there's some value with the games here at minus 2.5. I think Raonic has been solid here, but 3 sets against post-prime Bautista Agut and now facing off against de Minaur with no days off in between is not exactly an ideal spot, schedule-wise. So I am going to go with de Minaur to get the job done in this one. Moving on to the last match of the quarters for Den Bosch, you have a matchup between Humbert and Brouwer. So Humbert's a massive favorite, about minus 340, give or take. Brouwer's around plus 270. Game spread is minus 3.5 for Humbert, plus 3.5 for Brouwer. Over-under in games is set at 22 or 21.5 with some decent juice at minus 145. For the set spread, minus 1.5 and plus 1.5 are both at minus 115. Over-under in sets, the over 2.5 sets is plus 160. Now, I mentioned before, Dutch players have done well here in the past, but Brouwer's not very good, historically speaking, as he's currently ranked 241st in the world. Faced off one time in their careers in France, and Humbert did win in straight sets. There was a breaker there in the second set, though. That was on hard court. Brouwer went to 3 sets against Moreno, 3 sets against Garin, both in qualifying, 3 sets against Mensik in the first round, and then 1 against Manarino in straight sets. As for Humbert, he beat Fies in straight sets. That's it. So I think Humbert's the better player. Do I see much value with the actual spread? Not really. I think I'd lean to the games here, just based on the crowd being in support of Brouwer. Maybe you can find a 4. That might be appealing. Brouwer's not a bad server. He's not amazing, but I do think it can be an interesting matchup. Humbert, I think, will win. But with the crowd advantage, Brouwer might make it interesting. So I think that 3.5 or 4 might be a little bit too high. I'm going to lean to Brouwer plus the games for the value, but I really don't see much else in that matchup. Moving on to the matches in Stuttgart. First match, you have Draper taking on defending champion Tiafoe. Draper's minus 180, and Tiafoe is plus 160. The over-under set at 23. For the game spread, you have Draper minus 2.5 and Tiafoe at plus 2.5. So far in this event, Tiafoe's look fine. Tiafoe and Draper both look pretty good. Draper went to 3 sets, I said before, against Giron, so that was a competitive matchup. Did beat Offner 7-6, 7-6. Draper, though, is a pretty good grass player. Tiafoe played 1 match, beat Hanfmann 7-5, 7-6. Hanfmann's not an amazing player, but he is German, so he had to fight off a home crowd disadvantage, and he was able to get the job done. I think Draper's better on grass. The question is, do I think that Tiafoe can hang in there? I think he might be able to face off one time in their careers in Paris in 2022 on hard court, and Tiafoe did win in straight sets. I think I am going to lean to the over in this one. I think Tiafoe can serve well. I think Draper will be able to, I'd say, extract some unforced errors from Tiafoe, which should result in a marathon. I like the over, though. I think over 2.5 sets at plus 140 is pretty interesting, especially when you're expecting Tiafoe to serve pretty well in Stuttgart, because we know he has the serve that can definitely travel well throughout the court in Stuttgart. So I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets here at plus 140. I don't mind the over, but I do see a competitive matchup, and I do think a breaker or two might be in the cards for this one. So give me the over 2.5 sets at plus 140. Moving on, you have Struff taking on Nakashima. Nakashima was fortunate to avoid Zverev as Gasquet took his place, and he was able to win in straight sets. Struff is -2, and he's minus 195 on the money line. Nakashima is +2, plus 170 on the money line. The over-under is between 23.5 and 24.5. Over 2.5 sets is plus 135. Struff in straight sets is plus 120. Nakashima to win a set is minus 150. Struff has been really good so far in the event. Really no way around it. He is a finalist from last year. He is looking for potentially a vengeance if he faced off against Tiafoe, but he's looking for his second career ATP title after winning in Munich a couple of weeks ago. Struff, though, has been serving like a madman. He has had 0 break points faced in the entire event. I believe that nobody's had a break point against him. So he has been serving incredibly. And Nakashima had a tough match against Eubanks, which he won in straight sets. And he had a bit of an easier matchup against Gasquet, who we know is definitely well past his prime. I think Struff's going to win. Simply put, I do think that Struff is the better player. And I think you're looking at a Struff who should be able to use the great serve and the crowd to his advantage. Maybe a breaker in there, maybe 2, but I think Struff is more likely to get breakpoint chances than Nakashima will, because Nakashima's first serve percentage can be an issue at times, and Struff does have a pretty underrated set of volleying skills. So I am going to go with Struff, and I think he's going to win this one, potentially in straight sets at a pretty good plus money price of plus 120. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Duckworth taking on Berrettini. Berrettini is a massive favorite of minus 450. Duckworth is plus 360. For the game spread, you have Berrettini minus 3.5 and Duckworth plus 3.5. And for the over-under, you have 22.5. Both players had interesting matchups on Thursday. You saw Berrettini win comfortably against Shapo in straight sets, where Duckworth had a marathon against Shelton as he won in 3. You could argue, though, that the actual matchup against Shelton can prepare Duckworth for the powerful serve that Berrettini has. So maybe that can help him out. The question is, do I really want to lay 450 with Berrettini with no days off after beating Shapo, and he has not played many matches post-injury? Probably not. I think I'd rather lean to the over in this one. Berrettini, returning-wise, has not been amazing in the event, and I think that can be an issue. Duckworth's not a great server, but I do think that Berrettini might struggle to actually convert breakpoints in this matchup. So I am going to lean to the over in this one at 22.5. I think Berrettini is going to win, but 450 for a guy with injury history and a guy that's playing on back-to-back days for the first time in a while is not that attractive of an option to me. So I am going to lean to Duckworth, actually, at least to make it somewhat interesting. Give me the over 22.5 games at around minus 118. And the last match of the day should be a fun one. You have Bublik taking on Musetti, a rematch of a matchup earlier this year in Australia, which Bublik did win in 3 sets. A reminder, that matchup ended up taking place in Adelaide, where Bublik did win 7-5 in the 3rd set. For this one, you have Bublik as a decent favorite, about minus 216. Musetti's around plus 186. For the game spread, you have Bublik minus 2.5 games and Musetti plus 2.5 games. The over-under for total games is around 22.5 or 23. For game spread, you can find Bublik minus 1.5, by the way, at minus 140. Musetti plus 1.5 is a plus 110. Set wagering, Bublik in straight sets is plus 140. Musetti in straight sets is plus 325. Now, Bublik looked good in his first match here against Medjedovic as he won in straight sets. Musetti's been interesting because he had tiebreaks against Perricard, which he won both of, and he had tiebreaks in the first few sets as well in the Kepler match, and he eventually came back from a set down to win in 3. So Musetti's been involved in a couple of long sets here, and I do think that you're looking at what should be at least one long set as well, so I am going to go with the over in this matchup. Potentially a breaker would not shock me. We had a breaker in the matchup in Australia earlier this year, and a 7-5 in there. So I don't mind the over in with this matchup at around 22.5. I think there's some value on that one. I do think, though, Bublik is the better grass player, and we know Bublik is a head case, but he's definitely at his best on grass, so I think he's in line to look sharp. Musetti has been fine. Perricard's a good server, but he had all tie breaks in his last qualifying matchup for the event. So Perricard's still young and hasn't exactly been good with his returning, as he had 0 break points in that Musetti match. So overall, good performance by Musetti, but Perricard's not really a good returner at all. Kepfer's fine. That was a marathon, though, and Bublik is a massive step up in competition, where I think that Bublik should be able to get the job done in this one. So I am going to lean to Bublik, but I think I would lean to the over, though. I think 3 sets is a possibility, but I think that the over 22.5 games is probably the best value play for this one. You hope for a breaker, maybe 2, and maybe 3 sets in theory as a failsafe. So give me the over 22.5 games as my main pick for this match. That's going to do it for the actual quarterfinal matchups on Friday in Den Bosch and in Stuttgart. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. But before we continue that, do want to remind you once again, we are brought to you by Rhythm. This might be the last time you could use Rhythm for the NBA, as we might only have 1 game left in the entire season. They also have WNBA props, though. So if you do want to get into WNBA action, Rhythm does have you covered. If you're betting on player props, though, NBA or WNBA, you need to get Rhythm, because Rhythm is a predictions and projections app that makes data and analytics in sports betting easy for everybody. Rhythm's predictive models were born from the brains of MIT data scientists and quants with over 3 years of data to help drive you to better AI-backed betting decisions. Prop predictions are paired with trend graphs, so you can see for yourself whether or not the predictions have some value to them. And you can also use these actual predictions for sports bets or DFS picks. I do think at the end of the day, though, when it comes to Rhythm, they're very good at overall player props. So whether it involves, for example, Tatum rebounds in general has been pretty solid, with the exception of the last game. Jaylen Brown points was very solid in the last game as well. But Rhythm has been on point with their overall predictions for the NBA Finals, and they have done well for WNBA as well, since Terrell and I always read off Rhythm's best pick of the day, and they have done quite well for us on the show. From superstars to bench players, though, Rhythm does have the best player prop lines, all backed by AI data, so keep that in mind, so you don't have to constantly scroll through sportsbooks. They have everything you need in one location. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampodcast.com/rhythm, sportscampodcast.com/RITHMM. Sorry, just making sure that there isn't anything else to read. I think there is, but I can't fully. No, there's not. That's it. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the quarterfinal matchups for Friday in both Stuttgart and Den Bosch. Once again, apologies for the lateness of the recording time, but it is what it is. It was my birthday, and I was busy, so I had to wait until now to have the time to actually record the episode. However, time to get into the actual lock and dog picks for the show. Starting off with the lock, I am going to go with the early match in Den Bosch, and I'm going to go with the Korda and Paul match. Give me the over. 22.5 games, -130. There have been at least 23 games in each of Korda's first 2 matches here, which is kind of interesting because both matches ended in straight sets against pretty lesser competition. Point is, though, Korda has been winning, but the sets have been competitive. A couple of breakers were 7-5s, so I think that might end up happening once again in this one, not to mention the fact that Paul went to 3 sets in his only match here so far against Papiron. And I mentioned before, the head-to-head has been very competitive, as 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings have gone to a deciding set. So give me a marathon match once again. I think 22.5 games is a little bit low, and I do think you're going to end up seeing a very close matchup between 2 players that are pretty evenly matched. I believe based on the betting odds, Paul's -120, Korda is even money. You're expecting a coin flip matchup. Give me that to my advantage. Give me the over 22.5 games as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to Den Bosch once again. And even though I do love Raonic, and I'm happy that he's made it this far, I am going to fade him. I am going to take de Minaur to win in straight sets at +110. Raonic, I just have some issues with his overall stamina, and the fact that he went to 3 sets against post-prime Batista Agut, and a separate factor, He's playing for the second straight day for the first time since August 2023. And that one, by the way, he ended up losing to McDonald in straight sets in Toronto. So, point is, I have concerns about his overall stamina. We know he has an injury history, and we know that he had a marathon on Thursday. But it's the difference between having a day off and playing straight. I mentioned it before with the likes of Murray or Batista Agut or even like Schwartzman, etc. The older guys or the guys that have injury issues really need the extra day of rest in between matches to look sharp. And without that day off, which he had before his matchup against Batista Agut, I just question if he's going to be able to hang in there against Dimanour, who should do whatever he can to prolong the points. I think eventually Raonic's gas tank will reach E. I think Dimanour will be able to wear him down, and I do think that him winning in straight sets makes sense since he is 2-0 lifetime in the head-to-head. Now, Raonic can win the first set via breaker. It would not shock me, but Dimanour, we know, has been in great form this year. He's a fringe top 10 player, number one seed in the event, and I do think Raonic, with him playing on back-to-back days following a three-setter, is not a great scheduling spot for him. If Dimanour wins the first set, it would not shock me if Raonic started to struggle actually with his first serve percentage and got broken, maybe a time or two in the second set. So give me Dimanour to get the job done in this one, and I think straight sets has some value at plus 110. So once again, my picks for the quarterfinal matchups for Friday. The lock's going to be on Paul and Korda over 22.5 games at minus 130. For my dog, I am going to go Dimanour in straight sets at plus 110. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. A reminder, back once again later on Friday night for the Stuttgart and Den Bosch semifinal preview. So check out that episode as well. Find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the WNBA show. And find me on the MLB show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.